Most people don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they get used to living as a smaller version of themselves. Think about that for a moment. You didn't lose your dreams overnight. You didn't wake up one day and just give up. It happened slowly. A little compromise here, a little comfort there, a few excuses that felt harmless at the time. And before you knew it, you weren't who you planned to be anymore. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Nobody is coming to rebuild your life for you. No one is going to hand you discipline, self-belief, or courage. No one is going to show up one morning and magically replace your bad habits with good ones. That responsibility belongs to you, and only you. But here's the good news: most people never realize you are not broken beyond repair. You are not too far behind. You are not too old, too late, or too lost. You are simply unfinished. And the moment you decide to stop surviving and start rebuilding, everything changes. Not your circumstances, not your past, not other people. You change. And when you change, your standards rise. When your standards rise, your actions change. And when your actions change, your life has no choice but to follow. Personal responsibility is the foundation of real change because it shifts your life from being shaped by circumstances to being shaped by conscious choice. When you accept responsibility, you stop living like a passenger and start living like the driver. This doesn't mean that everything that happens is your fault, but it means that how you respond to what happens is always your responsibility. That shift in thinking is where real power begins, because as long as you believe your life is controlled by other people, bad luck, or unfair systems, you give away the very power you need to improve your situation. Most people find comfort in blame. It's psychologically easy to say, "This happened because of them," or "I am this way because of my past," or "If only the conditions were better, my life would improve." While these statements may contain truth, they keep a person trapped. Blame creates a sense of helplessness. Responsibility, on the other hand, creates a sense of control. The moment you say, "This is on me," you move from being a victim of circumstances to being a creator of outcomes. That mindset doesn't ignore hardship. It simply refuses to let hardship have the final word. Personal responsibility also builds self-respect. When you take ownership of your actions, habits, and decisions, you start to see yourself as someone reliable. You begin to trust yourself. Self-trust is built when your words and your actions start to match. If you say you will improve your skills and you actually do it day after day, you feel stronger internally. That internal strength is not loud, but it is powerful. It changes the way you walk, the way you speak, and the way you interact with the world. You no longer see yourself as someone waiting for life to improve, but as someone capable of making improvements happen. Another important aspect of personal responsibility is that it removes the illusion of fairness as a requirement for success. Life is not fair, and waiting for fairness is a slow form of self-sabotage. When you take responsibility, you are no longer asking, "Is this fair?" You are asking, "What can I do from here?" That question turns obstacles into problems to be solved instead of excuses to stop. It turns pain into information and failure into feedback. You stop seeing mistakes as proof of inadequacy and start seeing them as data that helps you adjust your approach. Personal responsibility is also deeply connected to discipline. You cannot be disciplined if you believe your behavior is caused entirely by external forces. Discipline is a personal promise kept even when no one is watching. It is choosing to do what is right, useful, or necessary instead of what is easy or comfortable. When you own your choices, you stop saying, "I had no choice," and start realizing that you are making choices every single day, whether consciously or unconsciously. Awareness of choice is a powerful form of freedom. This foundation of responsibility doesn't mean becoming harsh with yourself. It is not about self-punishment or guilt. It is about clarity. It is about honest self-assessment. You look at your habits, your patterns, your reactions, and you say, "This is where I am, and this is what I can improve." This kind of honesty frees you. It removes denial and replaces it with direction. You stop wasting energy pretending and start using energy progressing. When you truly embrace personal responsibility, your language changes. You stop saying, "I can't," and start saying, "I haven't learned how yet." You stop saying, "They made me feel," and start saying, "I felt because I interpreted it this way." This doesn't make you cold or disconnected. It makes you emotionally intelligent, because you understand that your reactions come from within and therefore can be managed and refined. At its core, personal responsibility is about dignity. It is about standing in front of your life and claiming ownership of it. It's about refusing to hand over the steering wheel of your future to chance, fear, or other people's opinions. When you live this way, you no longer drift. You move with intention, you act with clarity, and you build a life based on strength instead of excuses. Self-discipline is built through small, consistent daily habits because human behavior is shaped more by repetition than by intention. Most people believe discipline appears in moments of high motivation or sudden inspiration, but in reality it develops quietly through what you do when no one is watching and when you don't feel like making the effort. Big life changes don't come from dramatic one-time decisions. They come from ordinary choices repeated every day, often in boring, uncomfortable, and unimpressive ways. The mind and body are structured to follow patterns. Whatever you repeat becomes familiar, and whatever becomes familiar starts to feel normal. This means if you repeatedly choose comfort, avoidance, and distraction, your brain learns that pattern and resists anything that feels like effort. On the other hand, when you consistently make small, disciplined choices, your brain begins to accept discipline as your default behavior. This is why starting small is more powerful than trying to change everything at once. When the habits are too big, the resistance is too strong. When they are small, they slip past resistance and quietly reshape your identity. Small habits work because they reduce the emotional and mental burden of action. It's easier to tell yourself you'll read one page than an entire book. It's easier to commit to 5 minutes of exercise than a full workout. But once you begin, momentum often takes over. The hardest part of discipline is usually not the work itself, but the decision to start. Small habits lower the barrier of entry and make starting feel possible even on low-energy days. Consistency is more important than intensity because intensity relies on mood while consistency relies on structure. You will not always feel motivated, inspired, or energetic, but you can maintain simple systems that keep you moving even on slow days. A person who does a little every day for a year will always outperform the person who goes all in for a week and then quits. Daily habits turn effort into routine, and routine into identity. You stop thinking of yourself as someone trying to be disciplined and start seeing yourself as someone who simply lives this way. Self-discipline is also deeply connected to self-respect. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, even a small one, you build internal trust. You begin to see yourself as reliable. When you break promises to yourself, you weaken that internal trust. Over time, this determines your level of confidence. Confidence isn't built from praise, it's built from private victories. Simple habits like waking up when you said you would, completing a small task, or choosing a productive action over a lazy one create a quiet but powerful sense of self-belief. Daily habits shape your environment as well as your mindset. If you make it a habit to prepare your space, organize your time, and remove unnecessary distractions, discipline becomes easier. You're not relying on willpower alone, because willpower is limited and fragile. Habits automate behavior. They take decisions out of the moment and place them into structure. You don't debate whether to do the right thing. You simply follow the pattern you've practiced. Another powerful aspect of small, consistent habits is their compounding effect. The results might seem invisible for a while, which is why most people quit too early. But just like money grows with compound interest, effort grows with time. A tiny improvement repeated daily becomes a massive transformation when viewed across months and years. You don't suddenly wake up disciplined one day. You look back and realize your standards, behavior, and self-image have changed gradually and permanently. Self-discipline also protects you from emotional instability. When your actions depend on mood, your life becomes chaotic. When your actions depend on habits, your life becomes stable. You no longer ask, "Do I feel like doing this?" You ask, "Is this part of who I'm becoming?" That shift separates people who drift from people who build. At its core, building self-discipline through daily habits is about identity change. Every small action is a vote for the type of person you want to become. One small habit doesn't just complete a task, it reinforces a self-image. Over time, you are no longer forcing discipline. You embody it through repetition, structure, and quiet commitment that grows stronger each day. Failure is not an endpoint but raw material for growth because it exposes reality in a way that success often hides. When something goes wrong, it reveals weaknesses in strategy, gaps in preparation, and flaws in thinking that would otherwise remain invisible. People who fear failure try to avoid these moments, while people who grow learn to study them. The value of failure is not in the pain it causes, but in the information it provides. That information becomes the foundation for improvement when it is faced instead of avoided. Most people are conditioned to see failure as a personal verdict. A failed attempt becomes, "I am not good enough," rather than, "This method didn't work." This misinterpretation damages confidence and creates hesitation. In reality, failure is an event, not an identity. It is a result, not a definition. When you separate who you are from the outcomes you experience, you gain the emotional distance needed to learn instead of collapse. This mental shift turns disappointment into curiosity and embarrassment into insight. Failure refines character in ways comfort never can. Struggle forces you to confront your limits and decide whether you will expand them or surrender to them. Every time you fail and choose to continue, you strengthen resilience. Resilience is not built through easy wins or smooth journeys. It is formed in moments when quitting feels justified but persistence feels necessary. That inner muscle grows only when it is tested. Without failure, that part of you remains weak and undeveloped. Mistakes also teach humility. Success can inflate the ego and create a false sense of certainty. Failure disrupts that illusion. It reminds you that growth is a process, not a permanent state. When you understand that you can be wrong and still be capable, you become more teachable. Being teachable is one of the most powerful growth traits because it keeps you open to feedback, guidance, and refinement. A closed mind builds walls, but a humbled mind builds skill. Failure also trains problem-solving ability. When something doesn't work, you are forced to analyze, adjust, and try again. This cycle sharpens your thinking. You stop relying on luck or shortcuts and start developing deeper understanding. Each failed attempt strengthens your mental framework, teaching you patterns, risks, and opportunities that no book or lecture could fully transfer. Experience, even painful experience, forms wisdom faster than theory. There is also a powerful relationship between failure and courage. The willingness to attempt something meaningful requires the willingness to fail publicly, privately, emotionally, and repeatedly. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it is action in spite of it. And nothing tests courage like the risk of failure. Every time you face that risk and move forward anyway, you rewrite your relationship with fear. It loses its authority over you. This does not make you reckless, it makes you brave. Failure teaches patience through delayed success. Most people want immediate results and quick validation. Failure interrupts that fantasy. It teaches you that progress is layered and nonlinear. You learn to play the long game. You learn that mastery is built through repetition, not miracles. This kind of patience builds endurance, and endurance is one of the most valuable traits for long-term success. Another important aspect of failure is that it strips away illusion. When something fails, it forces honesty. You can't hide behind potential. You can't fake results. The truth is placed directly in front of you. This honesty is uncomfortable, but it is clean. From that clean foundation, real growth can be constructed. You stop lying to yourself about where you are and start working from reality rather than fantasy. Failure also builds emotional intelligence. When you experience disappointment, frustration, and self-doubt and learn not to run from those emotions, you become stronger internally. You learn to sit with discomfort without being controlled by it. This emotional strength is critical because life doesn't remove difficulty as you grow, it increases responsibility. Without emotional strength, higher levels of success become overwhelming. In the end, failure becomes valuable not because it feels good, but because it forces evolution. It challenges your habits, your beliefs, your strategies, and your identity. It removes what is weak and exposes what must be strengthened. When you stop trying to avoid failure and start trying to learn from it, your entire relationship with challenge changes. You stop seeing failure as proof that you should quit and start seeing it as evidence that you are in the process of becoming stronger, wiser, and more capable every time you rise again. Your environment shapes your standards, beliefs, and actions because human behavior is deeply influenced by what feels normal, familiar, and socially accepted. Very little of what people do is based on pure logic or willpower. Most behavior is an unconscious response to surroundings. The people you spend time with, the content you consume, and the physical spaces you occupy silently set the baseline for what you consider possible and acceptable. When an environment constantly exposes you to mediocre expectations, comfort-oriented thinking, and negative conversations, your internal standards gradually lower without you even noticing it. Standards are not formed in isolation. They are absorbed. If everyone around you tolerates being late, speaking negatively, avoiding responsibility, and settling for less than their potential, you begin to normalize those behaviors as part of everyday life. Over time, what once felt unacceptable starts to feel ordinary. This is how environments quietly shrink ambition. It is not always through direct discouragement, but through subtle repetition of low expectations. On the other hand, when you surround yourself with people who value growth, discipline, learning, and accountability, those qualities start to feel natural. You begin to raise your own standards not by force, but by exposure. Beliefs are shaped by repeated narratives. The way people in your environment talk about money, success, failure, relationships, and effort becomes the filter through which you interpret the world. If you constantly hear that success is for lucky people, or people like us don't get ahead, your brain accepts those ideas as truth. These beliefs become internal limits. They influence the goals you set, the risks you take, and the way you respond to challenges. The dangerous part is that these beliefs rarely feel like choices. They feel like reality. Only when you step into a different environment do you realize how limited your old thinking was. Actions are the most visible product of environment. You can easily see this in everyday life. Place a disciplined person in a chaotic, distracting environment for long enough, and their focus begins to weaken. Place an unfocused person in a structured, intentional environment, and their behavior begins to improve. This happens because humans adapt to reduce friction. We follow the path of least resistance. If your environment makes bad habits easy and good habits difficult, your behavior will eventually align with the easier path, regardless of your intentions. Physical space plays a powerful role in shaping behavior. A messy room creates mental noise. A cluttered workspace increases friction. A phone filled with endless distractions reduces attention span. These are not moral failures, they are environmental triggers. When your surroundings are designed poorly, you are constantly fighting invisible battles. When your surroundings are designed well, discipline feels natural rather than forced. The environment either works for you or quietly works against you. Social environment is even more influential than physical environment. Humans are wired for belonging. We subconsciously adjust our behavior to match the group we identify with. If your closest circle avoids responsibility and celebrates laziness, you will feel internal resistance when you try to improve. Improvement makes you different, and different feels risky to the brain. This is why many people sabotage their growth, not because they lack potential, but because they fear losing social acceptance. The environment rewards conformity more than excellence unless it is designed to value excellence. Environment also shapes emotional responses. Being in a negative environment makes stress, doubt, and anxiety feel normal. Positive environments don't remove struggle, but they provide psychological safety and encouragement. This affects how you respond to failure and pressure. In a destructive environment, you interpret challenges as proof you should quit. In a constructive environment, you interpret challenges as part of the growth process. The same problem can feel unbearable or manageable depending entirely on the atmosphere around you. Another powerful element is digital environment. What you watch, scroll, and listen to daily becomes mental programming. If your digital world is filled with distractions, conflict, comparison, and shallow content, your mind becomes overstimulated and underdeveloped. If your digital world feeds you education, inspiration, and thoughtful perspectives, your thinking becomes sharper and more focused. This is not about becoming extreme. It is about recognizing that your mind absorbs what it repeatedly consumes. In the end, environment works quietly but relentlessly. It rarely announces its influence, but its impact is constant. It sets your standards by showing you what is normal, shapes your beliefs by repeating certain narratives, and controls your actions by making some behaviors easier than others. When you consciously design your environment, you stop fighting yourself and start building a world that supports the person you are trying to become. Self-worth increases when you keep promises to yourself because your relationship with yourself is built on trust in the same way relationships with others are. When you tell yourself you will do something and actually follow through, you send a powerful signal to your mind that you are reliable. This internal reliability becomes the foundation of confidence. You don't need external validation when you know deep down that you can depend on yourself. That quiet self-trust grows every time your actions match your intentions. Many people underestimate how much broken self-promises damage self-esteem. When you repeatedly say you will start tomorrow, wake up early, practice a skill, or improve a habit, and then fail to follow through, the damage is not just about productivity. It creates a subconscious identity of being unreliable. Over time, you stop taking your own goals seriously. You begin to negotiate with yourself, justify delays, and treat your own standards as optional. This erodes self-respect far more deeply than failure itself, because it turns your word to yourself into something weak and disposable. Keeping promises to yourself builds integrity. Integrity isn't only about honesty with others, it is about honesty with yourself. When you act in alignment with your own values and intentions, you build inner strength. You don't wonder whether you're capable because you have proof stored in your daily actions. This proof doesn't come from big public achievements. It comes from silent consistency. The person who trains when tired, studies when bored, and works when uninspired develops a kind of inner pride that doesn't depend on applause. The act of keeping small promises is especially powerful because it trains your identity. Promising to drink more water, read a few pages, practice for 10 minutes, or organize your space may seem minor, but the psychological effect is significant. You build a pattern of self-respect. Each time you follow through, you reinforce the belief that you are someone who does what they say they will do. Identity is not defined by what you think about yourself, but by what you repeatedly prove to yourself through behavior. Self-worth grows because you begin to value your own standards. When you stop treating your inner voice like an optional suggestion and start treating it like a commitment, you elevate the importance of your own life. You stop waiting for motivation and start functioning through responsibility. This shift changes how you speak to yourself mentally. The inner dialogue becomes more respectful, more encouraging, and more confident. You are no longer constantly disappointed in yourself because you are no longer constantly betraying yourself. Another important element is emotional stability. When you keep promises to yourself, you reduce internal conflict. Many people live in a constant state of guilt and frustration not because of external pressure, but because they keep letting themselves down. That internal tension drains energy and focus. When you follow through on your commitments, you experience mental peace. You don't have to justify your behavior to yourself. You don't carry the silent weight of unfinished promises. That peace strengthens your emotional foundation. Keeping promises to yourself also cultivates discipline through respect rather than punishment. Instead of pushing yourself through self-criticism, you move forward through self-honor. You don't act because you are afraid of failure or ashamed of weakness. You act because you respect the version of you that is trying to grow. That respect makes effort feel meaningful instead of forced. It becomes an act of self-care rather than self-attack. There is also a deep connection between self-worth and boundaries. When you keep promises to yourself, you become better at setting limits with others. You value your time, energy, and goals more strongly. You stop overcommitting and people-pleasing at the expense of your own growth. This isn't arrogance, it's clarity. You understand that your life has direction and your commitments matter. People tend to respect you more when you respect yourself, not because you demand it, but because your behavior reflects it. Self-worth becomes stronger because you build evidence of your own strength. Instead of relying on hopes, affirmations, or external praise, you rely on lived experience. You can look back at your own history of follow-through and say, I am capable. That creates unshakable confidence. It's quiet, stable, and independent. Over time, keeping promises to yourself transforms how you see yourself. You move from self-doubt to self-trust, from hesitation to certainty, and from insecurity to quiet confidence. The more you respect your own word, the more valuable you feel as a person. Because you are no longer someone who abandons their own intentions. You become someone who stands by themselves, and that changes everything about how you move through the world. Growth requires letting go of old identities, excuses, and comfort zones because you cannot become a new version of yourself while clinging to the habits, thoughts, and behaviors that created your current reality. Identity is not just who you think you are, it is who you consistently act as. When you hold on to an outdated identity, you subconsciously protect it even when it limits your potential. People often say they want change, but their actions are still loyal to the version of themselves that feels familiar and safe. Real growth begins when that loyalty is broken. Old identities are powerful because they provide psychological safety. Even if the identity is unhealthy, it is predictable. You know what to expect from yourself. You know your limits. You know the roles you play. Letting go of that identity feels like losing a part of yourself. The mind resists this loss because uncertainty feels like danger. But staying in a familiar identity is not the same as being safe. It is simply being stagnant. The discomfort of growth is actually the discomfort of becoming unfamiliar to yourself, and that is one of the hardest transitions a person can face. Excuses exist to protect ego, not to solve problems. They are psychological armor. When you fail, an excuse allows you to avoid feeling inadequate. When you are afraid, an excuse gives you permission to stay comfortable. The problem is that every excuse you accept strengthens the version of you that avoids responsibility. Excuses feel like relief in the short term, but they create long-term weakness. To grow, you must be willing to feel discomfort, embarrassment, and uncertainty without hiding behind explanations that make inaction feel reasonable. Comfort zones are attractive because they minimize effort and risk. Inside the comfort zone, your identity is protected, your weaknesses are hidden, and your routines are familiar, but nothing new is created there. Comfort zones are maintenance zones, not growth zones. When you stay inside them, you may feel safe, but you slowly lose confidence, creativity, and resilience. The mind becomes lazy, the spirit becomes smaller, and potential becomes wasted. Growth requires stepping into zones where you are not yet skilled, not yet confident, and not yet certain. Letting go of old identity means questioning the stories you tell yourself about who you are. Many of these stories are built from childhood experiences, past failures, and labels given by others. I'm not good at this. I've always been this way. That's just my personality. Are not truths, they are habits of thought. When you dare to challenge these internal narratives, you disrupt the foundation of your limitations. This doesn't happen overnight. It happens through conscious action that contradicts the old story again and again until a new story becomes believable. Growth also requires releasing the need for validation from your old environment. When you change, not everyone will understand. Some people feel threatened by your growth because it challenges their own comfort. Others may mock, doubt, or discourage you. If you cling to approval, you will shrink back to your old self. Letting go of old identity often feels lonely because you outgrow the social feedback loop that kept you small. This loneliness is not failure, it is transition. You are moving from familiarity to possibility. Another part of letting go is accepting beginner status again. Old identity often protects your pride. It keeps you in areas where you feel competent or in control. To grow, you must become okay with being inexperienced, awkward, and imperfect. This requires humility. It requires patience. It requires accepting that growth makes you look foolish before it makes you look capable. Most people avoid this stage because it bruises their ego, not because they lack ability. Excuses must be replaced with ownership. Instead of saying, I can't because, you begin saying, I will learn how. Instead of blaming time, resources, or people, you focus on adaptation. This creates strength. You stop negotiating with your weakness and start aligning with your potential. The more you remove excuses, the more you expose your real power. Letting go of comfort zones reshapes your nervous system. At first, discomfort feels like danger. Over time, your body and mind learn that discomfort is survivable. Eventually, it learns that discomfort is the doorway to progress. What once felt terrifying becomes normal. What once felt impossible becomes routine. This only happens through repeated exposure to challenge. Growth, at its core, is an identity-level change. You are not just changing habits. You are changing who you allow yourself to be. You are releasing the version of you that was built from fear, limitation, and past conditioning, and stepping into a version built from courage, discipline, and self-belief. This process is uncomfortable, uncertain, and often slow, but it is the only path to meaningful transformation because you cannot evolve while protecting the version of yourself that was designed to stay the same. As we stand here today, remember this: rebuilding yourself is not about becoming someone new overnight. It's about becoming someone truer every single day. It's about choosing discipline over delay, growth over comfort, and courage over fear. You don't need a perfect start, you just need a real decision. Your past does not define you, your mistakes do not disqualify you, and your struggles do not weaken you. They prepare you. From this moment forward, you have a responsibility, not to anyone else, but to yourself, to rise higher, think bigger, and live stronger. Rebuild your mindset. Rebuild your habits. Rebuild your standards. Because the most powerful project you will ever work on is you. Good luck and thank you message. I wish each and every one of you the strength to rise, the courage to change, and the discipline to stay consistent on your journey. May you build a life you are proud of, step by step, day by day. Thank you for your time, your focus, and your belief in growth. Good luck, and may your future be stronger than your past.